I'm Heather Murray, Director of Art House Preschool in Wanakee. On behalf of our school, the Wisconsin Early Childhood Association, the Wisconsin Head Start Association, the Wisconsin Family Childcare Association, and the Wisconsin Childcare Administrators Association, we welcome you to this important event and thank you for your time. Tonight, we're here to talk about three things: access, affordability, and the long-term sustainability of childcare, an industry that is a public good in our communities and a cornerstone of our economy. In Wisconsin, childcare is funded almost entirely by parents. It often costs more than housing, and more families simply can't afford it. Early care and education makes everything else possible. It lets parents work, it shapes our youngest children, and yet for generations, our state has treated it as a private expense rather than a public investment. Consider this: Wisconsin spends less than $100 of general revenue a year per child under the age of 4 on early care and education. The moment that child enters 4K or Get Kids Ready public preschool, the investment jumps about $7,000. In K-12, it's more than $8,000 a year. The need doesn't begin at age 4, and our investment shouldn't either. Parents can't pay more, and the state invests almost nothing. So the cost lands on the people who do the work, leaving them in the bottom 2% of all earners. Over 40% of our early educators who care for and nurture our babies rely on public assistance to access health insurance and feed their own families. We know public funding works to increase access and affordability of high-quality care and education. We've seen the data in red and blue states across the country already investing, and we've seen the impact of significant federal funding through child care counts and bridge payments here in Wisconsin. These programs did three things. They helped programs stay open, retain their staff, and keep serving families through an impossibly hard time. With those funds, providers stabilized their workforce, raising wages, easing burnout, and rebuilding their teams. During the period of highest funding, the workforce and group childcare programs grew by about 17%, reversing years of losses. It kept care more affordable too. Providers held off on steep tuition increases, and nearly half passed support directly along to families. That funding officially ended 2 weeks ago, and now we're depending on our next governor to decide how to stop the anticipated mass closures and rise in childcare tuition costs. It is long past time for Wisconsin to stand behind its children, its families, and its childcare sector with a serious, sustained investment of state revenue. We've extended an invitation to every candidate for governor from both parties to be part of tonight's conversation. As nonpartisan organizations, our goal is simple: to put childcare in front of everyone who wants to lead this state. We're grateful for those joining us tonight. To kick things off, I'd like to turn it over to WICA's Executive Director, Ruth Schmidt, a fierce and longtime advocate for early care and education workforce here in Wisconsin.
Hello. So the challenges facing childcare did not start in 2020. Disinvestment in this field has held back to our state for decades. We've lost over 40% of our family childcare providers since 2013 alone, impacting children, working parents, and employers. The question is, in your first year, what is the single biggest childcare problem you will take on?
All right, well, first of all, thank you all so much for being here. I am Mandela Barnes, former Lieutenant Governor, really excited to be in the campaign to become the next governor of the state of Wisconsin. I often talk about the fact that I want Wisconsin to be a state where every child has at least the same opportunities that I had growing up. Now, I did have a good fortune of being an only grandchild, which meant that childcare wasn't too big of a problem for my parents because my grandparents, of course, were more than delighted to have me over the house all the time. But that's not everybody's reality. And childcare, just like K-12 education, so many of our other institutions in Wisconsin, is completely broken. Now, I'm preaching to the choir on this, but if you want to get a message across, you should preach to the choir. because that message needs to be delivered outside of these halls, outside of these doors. Too many folks in Madison find it easier to ignore this challenge as they ignored our children for far too long. Now, families are struggling to pay for quality childcare, and childcare providers struggle to be able to retain talent because of the difficulties of being able to pay staff adequately without raising costs on families. Now, early in the campaign, I had a chance to visit a number of early childcare facilities, had a chance to speak with parents, had the chance to speak with people who operate facilities, and some of the educators who work there. And it could not be more abundantly clear that we as a state need to implement universal childcare. Now, it's hard to pick just one thing that would be a priority because we need a complete system overload of early childcare here in Wisconsin. But universal childcare can manifest in many forms. There are different models out there, but I do support one that provides 100% free tuition for families that make under $100,000 a year. If you make above $100,000 a year, I do support a 7% income cap. This is how we create a system that provides a little more equity across the board. Now, will there be certain things we need to tweak along the way? Of course. I don't claim to be the expert. The experts are here in the room wearing yellow shirts, and I look forward to having a chance to engage you all in conversation when that time comes, when we craft a state budget that truly puts the children of the state of Wisconsin first, that truly gives an opportunity to parents who want to be in the workforce, but find themselves in a position where they're actually losing money by going to work and trying to find childcare for their for their children. This is an immediate problem we have to fix for the future of Wisconsin, and I couldn't be more excited to get to work on it with you all.
First of all, I appreciate everybody being here, and I appreciate your level of engagement and activism and what I have seen from you in past years. So I'm Joel Brennan, grew up the 10th of 11 kids, a fifth generation Wisconsin family, and I had the honor of being DOA secretary under Governor Evers for 3 years. But a bigger honor that my wife Audra and I have are being parents to two kids. And they were born 16 months apart about 20 years ago. And both Audra and I were working. And so we became parents of kids who went to Neighborhood House in the central city in Milwaukee, a nonprofit that's been around for about 80 years. And because all of you work in this business, you know what happens. We started as parents at Neighborhood House. I was asked to join the board of Neighborhood House. I became the chair of the board of Neighborhood House. This is what happens. You're in for a penny, you're in for a pound when it comes to early childhood education. And so over the course of the last 20 years, my son's in the back, and he's doing pretty well. So you guys can give yourselves a round of applause for how you do and what you deliver. But this has been a situation where there has been an emergency over the course of the last generation, and Wisconsin hasn't done enough. There are other states that have done more. So the question is around what will we do in our first year? You are living now 2 weeks from the state not doing anything more for bridge payments after 5 years of the payments that we were just kind of propping things up with federal money. You know, calling these bridge payments are supposed to be a bridge to something. And this has been a bridge to nowhere. So what will we do? One of the first things we need to do is emergency funding going into childcare in the first days of the administration. We're going to be living with this for the next 6 months. We need that to be the bridge to a bigger fix when it comes to the state budget, because budgets are about values in the state of Wisconsin. We became one of the last states in the last year to put any state money beyond what we absolutely needed to into early childhood education, one of the last 6 states in the country. We need to make sure that we fundamentally value this moving forward. And so, one, we will do that emergency. 2, we will work on things in the state budget like a refundable tax credit for childcare that we can make sure that we are doing over the long term. Doing things to invest in workforce. There are other states that are way ahead of Wisconsin. The state of Vermont passed a 0.44% payroll tax. In Wisconsin, that would be worth about $900 million that we could put into early childhood. We could do other things. Those are the types of things we need to do in the first year, in the first budget, but for the next generation. These are the things that we have just been ignoring as the problem has gotten worse and worse over the last generation in Wisconsin. And if we are going to be the Wisconsin that we want, it's going to mean we're investing in those 0 to 3 years where 95% of brain development happens. And we're then going to allow kids to read by age 8, lead by age 18, but you don't do that until you start where people live and where they are. So that's the first thing that we're going to do. Thanks everybody for coming out here today.
Thank you. Am I loud? Because I can be real loud. Okay. First and foremost, I just want to say thank you all for being here. My name is David Crowley. But before I go into my remarks, I do want to say just thank you in general for all the work that you do each and every single day. Many people may not look at this, but I do. You all are the unsung heroes. The reason why our children have a better foundation of learning before they enter our public school systems because of the work that you do each and every single day. And that's important to me. You know, I always talk about my better three quarters, but also have three daughters. You call them the A squad, 18, 9, and 6. And I'll have to tell you, I'm extremely proud of the fact that I have a 6-year-old because I don't have to pay for childcare anymore. Because all of us understand how expensive and how out of reach childcare is for many families across the entire state right now. And so when we think about what's the most important thing that we can do for you all right now, we can give you the money that you need, right? And it's about how do we utilize our child care development block grant dollars that we get from the federal level, but also coupling that with real estate investments so we can actually continue to build that better foundation of learning for our children. And it's not just about childcare. It's also about birth to 3, making sure that we're focusing on the health and the well-being of our children because they are our greatest commodity. And the fact that the state of Wisconsin has not made the investments that we need to make, it shows where our real priorities are. And I don't blame that on Governor Evers. I blame that on a Republican-controlled legislature because we need to instill more money into these programs so you all, one, can provide the great services you provide, but you also deserve not to go broke doing it. We know that you all are operating at a loss many of the times, if not all the time. And so I think it's incredibly important that we put our money where our mouth is. We can't just talk about our kids. We actually have to invest in our kids. And so I'm extremely proud to be here. Just want to say thank you again and looking forward to the continued discussion.
Thank you so much. It's really great to be here, seeing a lot of friendly faces and folks who have been in this work, doing the advocacy while operating your childcare centers, being moms, being everything that you have to be in everyday life, while having to fight for an industry that should have been treated as infrastructure, where the providers and our childcare educators should have been treated as the professionals they are for years, that the people who take care of our kids should have been taken care of for many, many years. We have gotten to this point. It took a pandemic for folks to recognize how important it is for the entire community to be invested in childcare. So I just want to applaud the work that you have done and the work that you continue to do and the work that I plan to be a partner in. The single most important thing that we have to do is fix the funding mechanism. Design something that is going to be sustainable, predictable, and adequate when it comes to investment in childcare. I think that emergency funding for the bridge payments is absolutely within the first 100 days, but how can we build into our funding system at the state to ensure that investments are going into childcare, not just from a single agency, but that we are seeing it as economic development, that we are working across agencies to make sure that this is something that is prioritized, as it is a crisis, no matter what region of the state you are in. I think we just have different metrics in terms of how we measure how difficult the situation is. Designing a new funding system for childcare and ensuring that we are investing to build in a program where childcare is free for all families making 400% below the federal poverty level, and those who are making above that, that it is capped at 7%. That the predictable adequate funding comes from actually funding childcare investments and the programs through a segregated fund, that it isn't having to piece together different funding while ensuring that access to the different vouchers and the shares programs is much more accessible. And that's going to have to come with funding state agencies as well, that we need staff to help people navigate the different programs that may be available, and that we ensure that we're taking care of our providers, that we're taking care of our workers, and that families have more access to childcare so that we can build in the actual universal childcare system that must happen in order for us to have an economy in Wisconsin that actually belongs to everyone.
I've had the opportunity to do a lot of things throughout my career. I'm an attorney. I've run a statewide nonprofit focused on reproductive rights. I've served in the state senate and in the state assembly, and I've been a small business owner for 13 years. And throughout most of that, I've been a working mom. I have 5 kids and step kids ranging from 25 to almost 5. And the reason that I've been able to do all those things are because of the people in this room, and specifically Alyssa and Ash and the team at Creative Learning Preschool. It was like a lot of round of applause, and I'm actually a little bit verklempt just even thinking about it. Because what they have done for our family goes so much beyond allowing me to work and giving our family economic security. They have taught me to be a better parent. They have helped me brainstorm how to address challenges in our family. They have loved my children. What is the price of that? The single most important work that any of us do as human beings is to care for other human beings. And the second most important is to educate human beings. And early childhood educators do both. So I am here because of all of you, and specifically here to make sure that that work is valued as the public infrastructure that it is. If we're going to address the childcare crisis, the way we do that is to make it possible for the people who love to do this work and know what it is to be able to afford to do it. It is money in your pockets. Addressing the provider shortage means raising the minimum wage. It means making you automatically eligible for state healthcare and state pension system so that you can have a secure retirement. It means making it possible for you to go to college and get that associate's or bachelor's degree in early childhood for free, or to get loan repayment as long as you are in the field. You can't do that without public money. And when we do that, when we actually have public investment in early childhood, then we can actually make it affordable for families because you won't have this huge provider crunch. We can do that by making Wisconsin shares universally available and capping the amount that families pay at 7%. There is nothing that's more important to me than making sure that every single child in the state, no matter who you are or where you're from, has the freedom to thrive. Public investment in early childhood is absolutely at the center of that. And I'm delighted that some of my colleagues on the stage have joined my longstanding pledge that on day one, I'm going to pass emergency funding to, number one, get special education reimbursement that you were promised in the last budget into our K-12 schools, to restore childcare counts funding so that providers get that emergency money. And we're also going to do a little bit of stewardship funds to get that conservation program back online. Thank you so much for having me today.
Thank you to all of the candidates here today for sharing your thinking on that. And I will now turn it over to Katie from Art House Preschool for your next question.
Thank you, Ruth. It's been a great start to tonight. All right, now that we're warmed up, let's move on to questions we received from the public. This first one is on the workforce behind the workforce. As both an educator and a parent myself, I know high quality care depends entirely on the people who provide it. And Wisconsin pays those people almost nothing. Our early educators average $13 to $14 an hour, putting their wages in the bottom 2% of all income earners in Wisconsin. A worker with just a high school diploma earns about $5.50 an hour, more in nearly any other field. As Dr. Laura Dresser of UW-Madison's High Roads Strategy Center puts it, this is the most highly educated, poorest paid workforce in our state. As governor, what would you do to raise wages and benefits for early childhood educators?
Hey, thanks for the question. One, over the last 6 years, both starting with childcare counts and with the bridge payments, that is exactly what has happened. We have taken the average wage that is at $13 and used that to help pay people $16 or $17 an hour. That's what's at risk right now. I was with a provider in Green Bay just a week ago. She does it out of her basement. And she said, as of Labor Day, prices are going up by 10%. This is not something that anybody here is foreign to you, because you know that. And that's not simply because she wants to, it's just because she has to. So what do we need to do? One, we need to make sure that we are restoring childcare counts, that we are finding a long-term solution. The refundable tax credit that I mentioned is going to be part of this, ensuring that we are capping costs for all of the people who are getting childcare. But, ultimately, it's about increasing access to Wisconsin shares, increasing the reimbursement for Wisconsin shares, creating a longer term solution that makes sure that we are investing this as the launching pad into K-12 education and the workforce issue that it is. People here know this, there's more than $1 billion of productivity that sits on the sidelines every year in Wisconsin because people can't find accessible, affordable, or high quality childcare. We need to be addressing all of those things, and it starts with the people who work in the daycares first.
And not just related to this particular group, but the first thing that the next governor can do is, one, we need to raise the minimum wage. I mean, the fact that we have a $7.25 minimum wage here in the state of Wisconsin is just, it's mind blowing to me. And the reason why I say it's mind blowing is because I got my first job when I was 14 years old and I made $7.50 an hour, right? We're talking about 25 years ago. Yes, I am old. But one, we have to work directly with the providers. It's about making sure that when we're talking about this funding, yes, we need to cap at 7%. We need to make childcare universal, but we need to be working directly with our home-based providers, our nonprofit providers, our Head Start providers, our tribal community as well, to understand what exactly is the floor of funding that you need to deliver the services adequately. And so I think that at the end of the day, it's about having conversations with you all. We are not the experts sitting up here, but we have the ability to push policies that directly impact you, And so understanding what that floor of funding should be with all of our providers will give us a better understanding of making sure that you are paying your workers adequately. But it's also important that we invest upstream. We need to create a better credentialing opportunity for individuals who want to work in the childcare field. And so it's going to take an incredible amount of work, but it's going to take all of us coming to the table in order to get this done.
Yes, I'm proud to be a co-sponsor of the living wage legislation to make sure that we increase the minimum wage to $15 an hour with a pathway to 20. 99% of the businesses in Wisconsin are small businesses. And it's important that we work with our small business community to make sure that it's a sustainable path to $20 an hour. But $20 an hour is not a living wage. And right now, our local governments do not actually have the ability to raise local minimum wage to a living wage. So we have to remove that state preemption as well, abolish the tip minimum wage, which is an abysmal $2.33 an hour, as well as a sub-minimum wage of $2.30 an hour. But I'm also incredibly proud to be the author of one of the most comprehensive paid family medical bills that has been introduced in the country. And family leave, 12 to 14 weeks comprehensive that the state provides, where it would not be a burden on the employer, where folks could take off work to take care of an aging parent or a new baby or someone who needs support because they are a survivor. These are all things that would be included and folks would be eligible for 12 to 14 weeks of paid family and medical leave. It's also imperative that we have a public option through the state that we invest in addition to expansion of Medicaid and expanding the state healthcare system to additional workers across the state, so that in addition to raising wages, we are ensuring that the state is providing paid family leave and healthcare that's accessible, affordable, and high quality for everyone.
I'm proud to be the lead author of the living wage bill that will raise minimum wages to $15 an hour with a path to 20 by 2030. I'm also proud to be the lead author of the bill to open up the state health insurance plan, the very same coverage that I get as a senator, to let anybody buy in. And I think childcare providers in licensed centers or homes should be presumptively eligible for that. But at the end of the day, all of us have great ideas about childcare, and we're going to want to do the things that you all know need to be done. Whether or not we can get them done depends on whether or not we can beat Tom Tiffany and win a Democratic legislature. So the most important work that I have done to try to advance this is never sit out an election cycle. That means doing what you have done over the last 5 years, and I've seen you all at midnight in the Joint Finance Committee. I have seen you showing up at rallies. I have seen you bringing your kids, and sometimes I bring mine. It is that political organizing work. We need a candidate who will not just do the right policy, but who can actually help deliver the legislative majorities and is willing to use that power to get it done. And that is the work I have been engaged in for my whole adult life as an activist, and of course, during the periods that I've been in the legislature. I am the candidate on the stage, the only one that can say that I have over 20 years of turning progressive ideas like the ones we're talking about here into state law in the toughest of political environments. And that is why, as governor, I will give you a raise.
Once I get a little older, I'll hit that 20-year mark. The funding question is vitally important. That's why I led with the fact that we need to have universal childcare here in Wisconsin. So many families get left behind, so many communities get left behind because of the lack of adequate funding. And I did mention the fact that there are so many providers who would love to pay a living wage and cannot do so without raising costs on families. Now, a couple things that have been mentioned, public option for badger care, but hey, I remember a time where, our providers were AFSCME members because they had the access to state resources and were seen as public employees. Getting back to that model might be a better option for folks who are looking to be able to provide and also have healthcare, have retirement, have everything else they need to live happy, healthy, and productive lives. Now, to get the money for the funding for universal child care, the easiest way is ending subsidies for data centers. That's $2 billion right there. That's $400 million a year that could go towards our children's future instead of industries that lead to the mental health crises amongst our youth and political polarization. We also can create an endowment fund with those resources and then also consider other revenue streams like marijuana legalization to help stabilize funding, which would provide us some very reliable sources of income to the state.
All right, thank you guys for your answers. Now I'd like to bring up Stephanie Frantz, an amazing parent from Art House Preschool with 3 kids, infant twins and a 5-year-old, to ask our next question.
All right, so Wisconsin has 236,097 children under the age of 5 who need childcare, and only 161,657 licensed seats. That's a gap of nearly 75,000 children. And infant seats are the most scarcest of all. And I took up 2 of those. So for the families who do find a seat, price is staggering. Full-time infant care now averages $17,400 a year in centers and 22% of the median household income and $13,000 in family programs. That's more than UW tuition. Childcare is becoming a luxury not everyone can afford, and for many families, the seat doesn't exist anymore. So, as childcare in Wisconsin is becoming a luxury good, especially for the missing middle, families who earn too much for Wisconsin shares but still can't afford care, what's your plan for them?
Thank you so much for that. And this hits personally for me. My youngest daughter is 6 years old. And when she was in daycare, it cost us $1,500 a month. My mortgage was only $1,000. So we're paying more than my mortgage to send our child to childcare. And then when she turned 5 years old, she qualified for a K-4. We didn't qualify for Head Start, so we had to actually pay for it, and that cost us $1,000. And so me and my wife, we had to have a conversation whether or not she was going to stay at home or go back to work. And I was joking with 2 of the ladies that she wanted to go back to work, and she said she needed more adults in her life. And I understand that because this is not just about our children, but it's also about the mental health of parents as well. And so we need to make sure that childcare is universal across the board for every child under the age of 5. We can cap the payments at 7% across the entire state. But I also believe that K-4 needs to also be universal, because that's an extremely important age before any of our children actually enter the school system. And so I am proposing that we have universal child care for every child under the age of 5. And many of you may say, well, how do we make sure that we have the bodies for that? And that's by investing upstream, making sure that we have enough childcare workers, we have enough centers, by making the upfront investment in the first place.
In order to fund a universal childcare program that is sustainable, we have to look at employer contributions. Our plan is both a small payroll tax with upfront costs covered by the segregated fund, and there are multiple trusts that I believe that the upfront costs, we can use borrowed funds for that. And while I agree that universal 4K and fully funding our public schools must come with that, I do know that there is a tension right now in which the 4-year-olds who are at our childcare centers, the cost for care for 4-year-olds is much lower than it is for infant care. And I have seen the Coalition for Public School Education advocates and our childcare advocates come together, but we know the system very much works to pit these communities against one another at times. So it's imperative that we look at sustainable continuing direct provider payments that are flexible, investing in a universal program for families who are making, that is fully subsidized for families making up to 400% of the federal poverty level. And this 400% is because right now for a family of 4, that's about $130,000 a year. So it does have to go up to about 400% FPL. And then beyond that payroll tax, of course, childcare being infrastructure, it's imperative that we use the tax exemptions that we have been providing to corporations. I'm so sorry, yes, we can still tax the billionaires and fund childcare.
The most expensive year of our lives was a year that my husband and I had my 2 stepdaughters in college. We had a senior and a freshman, and we had a baby. And yes, that is crazy. We paid more for 1 baby in daycare than for 2 kids in college. And we were delighted to do so. Thank you very much. To solve the provider shortage, you have to raise wages. But to solve the affordability portion for parents, we need to make Wisconsin shares universal. And the reason that's the smartest path for doing that is because the feds are covering a huge chunk of that, right? Roughly 60%. So why would we ever leave free money on the table? Now, for the state portion, yes, of course, we can increase our revenue by restoring some of the pre-Walker taxes and increasing taxes on multimillionaires and billionaires. We should absolutely do that. We should end subsidies for data centers. But my favorite plan is to get baked for babies, get stoned for shorties. It's about taking that revenue that we're going to get from legalizing weed and pouring it into early childhood so that people can really feel good about what that money is going to. And the other thing that we have to do is address infant care, and that's about universal paid family leave, because there is no care for the youngest babies. And every single person in the state, regardless of the job that you have, should be able to get that paid family and medical leave so that whether you're in an accident, whether you have a new baby, you do not have to risk your rent or your job.
So,
Mandela Barnes.
yeah, thank you so much. So the benefits cliff, it shows itself across the board in many different ways. I think about the fact that we haven't expanded healthcare here in Wisconsin, one of 10 states that has yet to expand our Medicaid program under the Affordable Care Act. And you consider the folks who are trapped between 100 and 133% of poverty who do not qualify for Badger care. I mean, even honestly, if you were above 133%, it's still difficult because that is not a whole lot of money. And people are making the unfortunate decision to go without health insurance simply because you just don't have the extra income to be able to afford it and be able to save for an emergency at the same time. This is the same thing that's happening right now with parents, with families who aren't able to afford childcare because of that benefit cliff, essentially. And what we need to do, of course, is broaden availability and eligibility for Wisconsin shares, but we can go back to that funding conversation we talked before. I wish I came up with some cool euphemisms like Kelda did, but the fact remains clear. There's so much money that we have left on the table. States like Minnesota, Illinois, and Michigan have taken advantage of. They've been able to do good things for their children with those additional resources, and it is important. It is paramount that Wisconsin does not leave a single dollar on the table when it comes to improving quality of life, especially for our young people when it matters the most.
Thank you. First of all, this doesn't start when they're infants. There are 26 counties in Wisconsin that don't have a practicing OBGYN in them. Like, this is not an issue that just starts after birth. It is everything, and all of these things are related. And, you know, and here in Madison, it's closer to $30,000 for infant care than it is the average that you talked about. So these are issues that are a problem everywhere in Wisconsin. So, you know, capping it, you said it was 22%, capping that at 7% is one of the ways that we do that. Ensuring that we increase eligibility around Wisconsin shares, increasing reimbursement. Those are all things that we can do. And there are resources that are available to do it. And every resource question is connected. You know, I'm going to talk about corrections. In the state of Minnesota, a state that is roughly the same size as Wisconsin and has the same crime rate, they spend about $213 per capita on criminal justice and prisons in Minnesota. You know, we spend in Wisconsin about $313. That's $100 per capita that we spend extra. You add that to you multiply that by the population of Wisconsin, that's $600 million that we could be spending on this part instead of what we're doing to house people when we haven't dealt with them, when we haven't invested along the way. Like, these are the things that we can do in Wisconsin that show the Wisconsin values. That's where we get resources, but it also is the smart thing to do economically too, because it pays dividends for us over the course of the entire lifetime.
Thank you all for those answers. I'd like to welcome up Jenny Maurer, Executive Director of the Wisconsin Head Start Association, for our next questions.
Okay, Head Start in Wisconsin serves about 12,000 children and their families. And these are our most vulnerable kids and families in the state. In Wisconsin, we have 41 grantees, 245 centers, employing about 4,500 staff, making us one of the largest employers in the state. And in many of our communities, Head Start is one of the only, or oftentimes the only, licensed childcare provider. Head Start relies on over $204 million in federal funding, with just $6.2 million from state funding. And right now, in case anybody's been paying attention, there's a tremendous amount of federal uncertainty and instability. And who's most at risk is our most vulnerable kids. And in rural Wisconsin, that risk is really the most acute. We see in the northern region, 70% of providers have wait lists. Similarly in northeastern and western regions. These counties with the greatest gaps also have the greatest need. So in much of the state, there's really no other backup. And if Head Start disappears, that really leaves children with no other options. So the question is, in much of rural Wisconsin, Head Start, as I said, is one of the only licensed childcare providers. And with the federal uncertainty, what would your administration do to keep Head Start doors open for kids and families?
I think it's imperative that we assess this moment for what it is. And we are in a crisis moment because of the uncertainty and the turmoil that comes from the Trump regime. And it's important that the executive and the administration, your next governor, be relentless in wielding the full power of the executive to ensure that we assess the childcare crisis for what it is. I would be willing to call in the legislature to a special session to unlock the rainy day funds to ensure that there is additional emergency funding that would go into funding Head Start. I think it is imperative that, again, flexible, adequate funding that is not only a budget item, but looking at making sure that it's coming from a segregated fund and expanding investment into Head Start. But I think too, this has to come with increasing our shared revenue. Many of our local services that families depend on come at the county and local government levels, and increasing our shared revenue, making sure that counties and towns are funded adequately so that essential services are available for families. But I think making sure that I would want to make sure that the funding is, the emergency funding is available, that we call in the legislature to unlock funds where they are. We saw what happened this past year with the Head Start funding being cut. We saw people having to go into, I'm sorry, I need to keep looking at you. Heather, thank you for that. But willingness to use emergency funds, absolutely.
The most important thing that our next governor is going to be doing is to protect our rights and freedoms from this dangerous authoritarian regime. I will use every tool at my disposal to protect us from the ways in which we are being harmed by the Trump administration as governor. You don't have to take my word on that. You can actually see what I have done over the years to stand up to bullies and billionaires and right-wingers. And Jenny, I want to thank you for answering the call, because when Donald Trump and the Republicans illegally were essentially stopping Head Start payments, and there was a question about whether providers were going to get their money, we thought that was an emergency and people needed to know about it. And we were organizing a press conference, and you helped and answered the call so that we could help people understand the connection of what this Doge nonsense was and how it was going to affect people's lives and our economy, including people who didn't have kids and Head Start, but it would still harm them. And that is really, really important. Yes, of course, we can use rainy day funds, and we should, for emergencies like this. But most importantly, we also have to be using the legal tools at our disposal. And as an attorney, I am so offended by what this regime is doing to undermine the rule of law. And that is why one of the things that I have pledged is that as governor, any federal agent, whether that's an ICE agent or a member of the Trump administration, that breaks our state laws will be prosecuted and held fully accountable, because nobody is above the law, and what they did was illegal.
Thank you. And so far, a lot of the ideas are very similar. What it takes is somebody who's going to act with urgency. That has typically been the problem, especially with our party. We haven't always governed with urgency. We let things happen to us, and we go through the long drawn out thought process of how to respond. And it has made things much more difficult, has made things much more challenging, and it's also eliminated opportunities for so many people in so many different ways, because we're taking as much time as we have taken on an issue like Head Start. Then think about how many children slip through the cracks because there's no other options for them. And so I believe in everything that has been said before. What we do have is an opportunity through the budgeting process to make sure that there is money for an emergency situation like this, and also calling an emergency session of the legislature to respond to the crisis. But also, again, I'm glad you mentioned the legal strategy. We need to not just empower, but sometimes, put a little kick in the Attorney General's office to show up to do what is needed to be done when the White House, when the federal government, when Donald Trump does something out of spite that ultimately makes it harder for Wisconsinites to be able to achieve the American dream, which starts at an early age. And so whether it's the emergency funding or empowering the Attorney General's office, we got to take every step possible. I think those are the two easiest ways we can get it done.
You mentioned there's 12,000 kids in Head Start, and if I'm not mistaken, at least 2/3 of those kids are there so that their parents can be working. Like this is a workforce issue, and it's one that we absolutely need to deal with. And at best, what we're doing with Head Start, because of all the work that's gone on here and other places, we're standing still. Costs are not standing still. If we are still able to even get that $200 million, that doesn't mean that you can keep delivering the services you did last year, because we've had these other discussions around paying people and simply the costs of doing business. And, I don't think we need to tap into a rainy day fund for this. Like, we have had discussions around a budget surplus. Now, we should be cautious around what that budget surplus is going to look like on June 30th. But rather than going into all kinds of machinations around a rainy day fund, there are dollars that should be available to do this as an emergency in the first days of the next administration. And that's what I'm going to do. You are going to be living for the next 6 months under an emergency that's gotten worse because of state inaction, because this bridge funding that was there was a bridge to nowhere. And we need to be in a position where we are going to meet those needs now. Ultimately, we are going to also need to be able to withstand the 24 months of the Trump administration that we are still going to have from January of this coming year until January of 29. There you go. Thank you. So we need to make sure we're doing that, but there are emergency things that we can do today. And then it is about what the next budget is going to look like. And if you give me a few more allies in the legislature, we are going to be markedly different than what the last budgets have looked like in Wisconsin.
One of the scariest things that the next governor is going to be dealing with is how do you plug the holes that the federal government has created? It's not just around Head Start, it's around healthcare, it's around many different things. And so the next governor has to be prepared. And I want you all to know as a county executive, I've not only fought against the Trump administration, but we've won. And I think that we need someone who's not only going to provide that emergency funding, but we need to create sustainability. Because I don't know about you, but when the federal government cuts programs, I don't see those programs coming back that quickly. Right. And so we're talking about not just under the Trump administration, but who's going to be the next president to make sure these dollars are coming back to states across this country, you know, under this. And if we don't defeat the Trump legacy, we know this is going to continue. And so the state has to step up and figure out how we're going to plug these gaps. As Joel said, and everybody has said, it's not just about the emergency funding or using the rainy day fund or using the surplus that we have. We need to make sure that we are fully fixing the Head Start problem so we can take care of our own kids. We can't continue to rely on the federal government, and the Trump administration is showing us that each and every single day. And so this is about seriously working directly with you all. I was told that when you don't have a seat at the table, you're on the menu. And many of you have not had a seat at the table. And so we need to make sure that we're listening directly to you to figure out how do we create a more sustainable program that we can invest in the state so we never have to rely on the federal government moving forward.
Well, thank you all for those answers. Next, I'd like to welcome up Bev Anderson from Ebenezer Childcare to ask our next question.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Only 10% of regulated early care and education seats in Wisconsin serve infants. These are our most precious assets, and also those who can't tell us about their own experiences during the day. My question for all of you, young parents need infant care most. What are your goals for creating more infant and toddler care so families can stay in the workforce?
The beginning of the answer to this is paid family leave, which is something that I have championed and authored since I think 2011. So before a lot of people even knew what paid family leave was. It is essential for families to have that early bonding time with their baby. And it should not depend on the wealth of the family or the kind of job that you have, whether you get it or not. It's also, by the way, important for early childhood providers and educators to be able to have that time on as employees and workers themselves. Fran was touching on this, but there is a tension between expanding 4K programs in public schools because 4-year-olds subsidize infants, and it's virtually impossible to make the numbers work in an early childhood center for infants if you don't have 4-year-olds, just because of the ratios. I mean, this is not something where you can automate or efficiency your way out of this problem, and it just requires more money. We have a mental health crisis among children in this country. And one of the things we don't talk about very much is infant mental health. And it starts by having that attachment, that safety and security of a loving caregiver as an infant. And that is why the idea of increasing ratios is anathema. We cannot do it. We have to simply put the money in, and we have to make sure that there are staff that are specifically trained in infancy and birth to 2, which is different than just early childhood overall. That's why making it free or affordable to go to school and having loan repayment programs is essential to solving this crisis.
It all comes back to having money in communities to be able to provide these sort of services for infants. And it goes back also to the conversation about being able to hire teachers, being able to hire educators, which is a persistent challenge. Now, what I have proposed is making sure that continuing education programs are available, free and low cost technical college education for people to go back to be specifically trained to have the skills that are necessary to take care of infants, but also paid family leave goes a long way as well, because while it is important to have infant care, it is also important for that family time to be available, and many parents are at risk of losing their jobs if they even think about taking time off to be with their children, or because not losing their jobs could be losing a home or getting evicted because you are going to miss that paycheck simply because you wanted to take care of your child. Now, this unfortunate reality that we find ourselves in, it treats bringing a child into this world not as the blessing that it is. It treats it like a burden. And the United States of America is so far behind other developed nations in getting our act together and being able to create stable family situations. And it's so funny because there's another political party that always talks about family values. And lo and behold, they never passed a single family value piece of legislation. Anytime something's been introduced, it's never got a public hearing. They never hear it. You have a former governor who made things harder for children and providers in this state as well.
I mean, I think it's clear. The infants are the most expensive. I was talking to somebody over here who is closing their infant room simply because they of that expense and the caregivers that are required there. And we all know how important that is. And so, you know, everybody has said that starting this with paid family leave is critically important for families. But there's also ways that government has to be a partner in this. In my home community in Milwaukee, I've worked with a network where United Way, which was backing off of being involved in early childhood education, can be part of that. Philanthropy is not going to take all of this over, but if government is doing its job, then philanthropy should be there and the corporate community should be there to be able to do this as well. You know, there are things around training that are absolutely important to do. I don't think any of us has mentioned the WECA rewards program that, you know, the largest chunk of funding you ever got was through COVID money. And then there was one budget that there included a little bit more, but since then there has been nothing. Like a sustainable, you know, intentional way that you can continue to do that, and then working with technical schools, then working to ensure that young people, even as quick as early as high school, are getting into apprenticeship programs. This is one way for us to start to deal with this in a long-term and in an intentional way, rather than lurching from crisis to crisis to crisis. So like, this is, I think, how you ultimately deal with this over the long term.
Absolutely. Thank you for that question. And I think that paid family medical leave is paid family leave is absolutely one of the key points here. And this is important for me because when I became county executive, there were so many people who were struggling to find childcare. And one of the first things that we did is that we actually expanded family leave. And we expanded family leave not just to males, but we actually expanded it to where you didn't have to go through a probationary period anymore, right? Because there are many women who may be actually pregnant and can't find employment because they are pregnant. And so we actually institute a paid family leave to make sure that no matter when you're hired, you can get access to the care that you need. You can stay at home and do what you need. But we also need to make sure that there are providers that are available, which goes back to how we invest upstream. You know, how is the state going to make sure that we have enough early childhood care providers is extremely important. And so we can't just keep talking about it. We have to put our money where our mouth is. And so at the end of the day, we have to continue to put our money where our mouth is, but it's about working with you all, having a better understanding of what the expense really is. And that's what I mean by understanding what the floor is by getting those dollars in the door so you can have everything that you need to sustain your businesses.
The care infrastructure, care economy, caring for folks who care for our most vulnerable. The disinvestment from this and not seeing it as a public good has led to this crisis. And so I think the solutions have to match, the solutions have to be comprehensive enough to make sure that we do not come back to these moments. So the investment must be in both workforce and I think also in enhancing partnerships that are private-public, but we've also disinvested in our tech colleges, and the direct provider payments to infant programs is something that I would support. To have flexible funding, making sure that if there are partnerships with local universities, that we are investing still in loan forgiveness programs for folks going into early education, that we see and help get state funding to build partnerships that are within research and in the education systems. I think that this really comes down to prioritizing funding and making that funding easier, accessible, and more equitable to access. And that requires navigation programs as well. Infant care is one where just because it is the most expensive doesn't mean that we shouldn't be investing even more heavily into it. And so expanding the direct provider payments, investing in workforce, and uplifting partnerships with tech colleges as well is where I would put additional investment.
Thank you all for your answers. I'd now like to welcome Paula Drew from Rica.
All right, this isn't just about seats, right? It's what happens inside of childcare programs. Decades of research led by Nobel laureate James Heckman shows that high quality early care and education returns at least 13% per every dollar invested in early care and education. This is through better academic outcomes, higher lifetime earnings, and better fiscal health. Quality is inseparable from the people who deliver it. Many of them are here tonight. We heard earlier that what Wisconsin pays its early educators, and you cannot build a classroom or a workforce that can't afford to stay. I was a teacher myself, and I'm not a teacher anymore because I couldn't afford it. When the teacher at Toddler Trust leaves for a job that pays more, that child loses the very relationship the research shows matters most. And the benefits aren't reaching everyone. With only 60% of slots affordable under Wisconsin shares, against a 75% statutory target, and infant seats scarcest of all, the children who would benefit most from high quality early care and education are least likely to face it. And as Ruth mentioned earlier, our family child care providers who are holding up infant care, rural care, and also care for shift workers are finding it more and more difficult to continue to provide, to operate their businesses. So this is the last policy question tonight. You guys have talked some about your plans to fund early care and education. We know that the problems are pretty significant, right? So I want to hear what your plans are to, with ongoing money and the state, specific ongoing money, what sources of funding will you actually use to pay for this? And also if there's anything else you want to wrap up in terms of talking about the workforce, or any other challenges that you all talk about tonight.
One thing you brought up was the investments and the return on that investment in early childhood education. And we just do a terrible job as society at investing in things that work or produce results because they're a little bit more difficult to implement. But we can't run away from good solutions to terrible problems because it's difficult. Like I just had a conversation with somebody about homelessness and the fact that it costs us more to have people unhoused on the streets than it does to actually house them. Issues like treatment and alternative diversions that save us money on the back end when a person has an opportunity to go into a treatment program because they've committed an offense, a nonviolent offense, saves us money on the back end, and we don't spiral out of control just spending money on things that don't work as we have been doing for so long. And even the money that is invested in early childhood education, as it produces more money on the back end, the fact that we have not invested that money has cost us so much year over year over year, generation over generation. What has also cost us money is these tax loopholes that have been allowing the most wealthy in our society to get away without paying their fair share, whether it's Foxconn or whether it's $2 billion in subsidies for data centers. This costs us money, whether it's the agriculture manufacturing tax credit that sees the bulk of the benefit going towards large corporate farms, not our family farmers, and out-of-state corporations instead of small businesses in Wisconsin. We have been taken advantage of for far too long. The money is there. It is being spent wrong. It is not being prioritized in terms of supporting our young people, our youth, and our future. I fully believe that the resources are there because we've seen it spent elsewhere in places where it shouldn't be spent or in places where people already have obscene levels of wealth. So those tax subsidies have to go. We have to tax billionaires and legalize marijuana.
This is a broad question of how Wisconsin and how we will lead. And all of you, despite all the best efforts, can recognize Wisconsin is behind where others have been when it comes to childcare. We have the example of what's happened in New Mexico. They put a flag down in 2019 and said, we'll have universal childcare by 2025. It's now happened. The state of New Jersey, the state of Vermont that we have talked about doing a payroll tax. It's like there are others. The state of Michigan, where there is a tri-share program. We haven't really talked about this. We have talked a lot about state investment. Businesses have a responsibility to pay for this too. And there are other states that are doing that better than Wisconsin. And we can start to implement those things here. If we are in a position where we want to be a leader again. Now, the thing that has been heartening to me, I have visited lots of daycares, and I have done that, I probably have done a dozen of those over the course. I launched my campaign the first day I went to Neighborhood House where my kids were. But you know what I've also done? I've talked to chambers of commerce. In the Chamber of Commerce in Eau Claire, they put childcare at the top of their list around what are the things that are keeping them from being able to grow businesses in that state. Like all of this stuff, you have been lonely in your advocacy sometimes. I used to say to people, you need more people with suits and ties there. The K-12 people, they have that, but you're getting that as advocates. And now you're going to have a legislature and you're going to have a governor who know about these things and who can be your advocate along the way. And so, yes, we need to make sure that we are doing those things over the long term. I mentioned already that, we can spend, as much as we can spend $100 more per capita than Minnesota does on our corrections, or we can invest those upstream and take all the benefits that that's going to do over the course of a generation. Yes, absolutely, we should legalize, regulate, tax marijuana, and take the benefits of that. Making sure that we can make investments like that is going to pay off for us over the long term and be the Wisconsin we want to be.
I really appreciate this question. So when you think about how we're going to fund it, I think some of the money is already there, right? I remember when I was in the legislature, it was about an $86-90 billion budget, and now we're at $111 billion. And I know the state of Wisconsin has not grown that damn much. And so we know that some of the money is there, but there are things that we need to do locally as well. One, let's continue the commutation program that Governor Evers has put in place, right? Where we're able to keep people out of the prison system and also implement criminal justice reform, which is costing us $50,000 per adult. And if you think about it per child, it has changed now, but we were spending close to $400,000 to send a child to Lincoln Hills a year. Just put that in perspective as far as what we could be doing with our young people. So commutations and criminal justice reform is one way to find these dollars. The other thing that we need to do is we need to repeal many of the Walker era tax breaks that he has put into place. Whether we're talking manufacturing and agriculture, but many of these businesses who are making hand over fist, they need to be paying their fair share. If we can have businesses spending millions of dollars in campaigns, right? There's no reason why they can't spend millions of dollars on our children and the workforce that they're going to need in the next couple of years. Because I truly believe when it comes down to early childhood education, when it comes down to education in general, not just about our children, it's the biggest workforce development program that we actually have to make sure that they're thriving. Because health isn't just mental and physical. Money in your pocket is health. Having a roof over your head is health. Public transportation is health. All these things contribute to our overall health and well-being. And I truly believe that the more we're able to invest in early childhood education, the more we'll be able to invest, the less that we'll have to invest in the criminal justice system long-term.
Legislation that I am incredibly proud to say has support from every single Democrat in the legislature is healthy school meals for all. But there's one problem with this bill of mine is that it doesn't extend to early childhood centers. I would like to see this bill actually extend to early childhood so that we can help our child care centers and our providers actually have funding from the state for healthy snacks and for healthy breakfast and lunch. Eliminating the Wisconsin Manufacturers and Agricultural Tax Credit to make sure that it isn't benefiting the largest corporations and the largest manufacturers will actually help pay for healthy school meals for all for at least 2 sessions. In addition to everything that has been mentioned here, I think that it's important that we think about how this will be instituted, with what sense of urgency and what kind of leadership is actually required to make sure that this gets done in the first budget session. And I think about our neighbors in Minnesota. They stayed hyper-disciplined, very much like I have to be in restaurants. I'm a chef by background. And you need to make sure you're going into Friday service with your prep list finished and ready for whatever may come. But I think if knowing bills like healthy school meals for all, like paid leave, legalizing marijuana, making sure that we are eliminating corporate loopholes, tax credits for the wealthiest, having an actual fair tax system. These are things that in lockstep, I believe centering efficiency while also encouraging innovation in our state agencies and having an executive that is willing to be collaborative and make sure that they are working with every single person that wants to get things done. This is the approach and the vision that we also have to have in the governor's office. And so we have a lot to do in a 2-year session, but I truly believe that it is absolutely possible when you make sure that everyone on the team knows exactly what needs to get done, that we are organizing now to make sure we build in that trifecta, and that yes, we need a segregated fund for childcare costs.
What they said. We know how to solve this problem, right? We absolutely know how to solve this problem, and we absolutely have the money to do it. Don't let these Republicans who set $2 billion to data centers and $3 billion to Foxconn tell us that we don't have the money for our babies and our children. We have endless money to hurt people with prisons. But what if we never had opportunity gaps form? And the way that you do that is by investing in early childhood. There is nothing more important. And I am proud to be the public education champion in this race. I've earned the backing of WEAC, our state's teachers union. And part of the reason why they told me was because of the strength of my advocacy and work and leadership on early childhood education. And part of the reason that I've been able to be effective on that issue is because of you, because of the organizing work that we have done together over the past several years. There are people in suits. I sit on the Joint Finance Committee and travel around the state and listen to people come and they testify about this, that, and the other thing. And the one thing that every single employer has said is, and also childcare, whatever they're there to testify about, and also childcare. We did that. You guys did that. So I really thank you for doing that. If we want the Wisconsin that all of us deserve, that we have been yearning for the last 15 years, we've got to build it together. So I really want you to think about making sure we have a governor who can not just beat Tom Tiffany, but is actually ready to go and make the change. This is the work that I've been able to do as a legislative leader, as a nonprofit advocate, as an attorney and a small business owner, and just an average citizen, to turn progressive ideas into law again and again in tough political environments. Make no mistake, even if we have a Democratic trifecta, it won't be easy. What we need is the political will. And I have been willing to exercise that again and again to get things done for people like us, because we deserve it. And our kids certainly do too.
All right, to close us out, I'd like to welcome up my friend and WECA colleague, Tanya Wooden.
And to send us off on the right note, here's your prompts. What gives you hope about Wisconsin's children and families? And we will start with candidate Brennan.
You do. The fact that this is an industry that is as organized, that is as effective as you have been, despite the generations of disinvestment. Despite the fact that for the last 15 years, Robin Voss's response has been, Mom ought to be staying home with her baby. Like, this is what you have withstood, but this is the opportunity. In 2010, we held the most consequential election in my in-state history in my lifetime. Scott Walker won. The stakes were very high then. Over the last 16 years, we have lived with the consequences of Act 10. We have lived with the consequences of gerrymandered maps. We have had a Wisconsin that many of us hardly recognize, and you have withstood that. And now you stand on the precipice of having a governor who can be your advocate, having a legislature that will allow you to do things. But it is critically important who that governor is. You know, it was a whisper when we started this campaign, who can beat Tom Tiffany? Now it's a roar. And there are challenges around it. And I will take a backseat to no one when it comes to a 25-year history of getting stuff done in Wisconsin. Over the last 20 years, having nothing but executive positions and differing from some of my colleagues in that. I served as Governor Evers' DOA secretary during COVID, when if we didn't deliver, people were going to die in state government. You know who did that too? You did. You did that as child care providers. You set the stage for us to recover stronger from COVID than we went into it. What gives me hope is we can do more. We have the ability to do more now. We can close the book on what happened in 2010, that generation of harm that's been done to us. And we can look back in 2040 and say, in 2026, we started something. We started something that we lived in over the last 15 years, and you were part of that. Thanks very much for having me here today, and thanks for the work that you do.
First and foremost, I just want to say thank you all for joining us, and hopefully you get a chance to, I don't know if the World Cup is still on, but hopefully you get a chance to watch something or go to enjoy yourselves. Is it over?
Spain won.
Spain won? Okay. I'm not the only one. So again, want to say thank you, but what really gives me hope is not just the individuals who are in this room, it's actually the moment that we are in right now. When we talk about childcare, it's affecting both Democrats and Republicans. It's affecting those who have and have not. And so now is the moment where it feels like everybody has had their backs to the corner. And now it's time for us to fight like a raccoon would out of that corner. And I think that we're in a moment right now to where, as the state senator was talking about, we have to have the political will. And because every corner of the state of Wisconsin, everywhere in between, they're affected by this issue. It's affecting businesses. It's affecting families. It's affecting our children. It's affecting the mental health of our community. And so right now, I do believe because of the moment we're in, this is the perfect opportunity to elect the next governor who can actually get it done. Whether we are talking about getting it done in a trifecta, which we all need to make sure that we're working extremely hard at. And I know this is a nonpartisan event, but even if we still have a Republican-controlled legislature, we can still get it done. As county executive, I represent a Democratic area, blue area of Milwaukee. And all the wins that we've been able to deliver has happened under a Republican-controlled legislature. And so I truly believe that we're in the moment that we can get this done because our children, it's the best commodity. It's our most prized commodity that we have. And so it's extremely important that all of us step up and make sure we get it done, not just with this election, but we have to make sure that we stay engaged to get the policy, the rulemaking, and implementation done the right way. Thank you for being here.
They say hope can be dangerous. But Wisconsin children and families, they gave me hope because they are meeting the moment with a movement. I've met children when I was in Marinette, having kids come up to me and ask me what I'm going to do for them in their schools. I had a young woman in Evansville, I think you probably talked to them too. She asked about how we were able to have fewer screens in class. We see families consistently show up for one another because when systems fail, communities show up. But this is unsustainable to rely on just the pure resiliency of our children and families across the state without providing them the rights that they absolutely deserve when it comes to investment in community so that they can continue to build and have the things that they need to thrive and they are not forced to continue to be resilient. I think in a movement moment, it's imperative that we have people who are leading with humility and courage and a willingness to show up in spaces that are maybe even dangerous. Ours is a campaign that has continued to have conversations with the Trump voters, where we go in places, maybe it's a dive bar or a bowling alley. I still have yet to go to a racetrack, but I'm going to get there. Working class people all across the state feel deeply left behind and ignored. And they deserve a governor, you deserve a governor who is going to continue to show up and work harder than anyone else in state government. That is a promise that I know I will keep. Thank you all so much again for being here and for fighting for all of our babies.
First, I'm going to talk about what I fear. I fear Republicans and big money trying to buy this election. They have made it very clear, not only that they want to medal in our primary, but they have also invested $16 million in trying to flip the legislature Republican. They apparently see a path to a Republican trifecta, as we've been spending the last year going to rooms like this talking about a Democratic trifecta. That is scary, and we should take it very, very seriously. But what gives me hope is our history. Wisconsin has been a leader on so many progressive issues, and we are poised to do that again. If the leader of the regime in Washington has done anything positive for us, he has broken open this idea that the US can just continue not having a social safety net, we'll just rely on women. We can actually have nice things. We can build it here in Wisconsin because we have done that again and again and again. And that is what is exciting to me about this moment. It is time for us to unite. And every single one of us has said repeatedly that whoever is the nominee, we're going to work like hell for that person. And I hope everyone in this room feels that way too. But we need to unite behind a candidate who can beat Tom Tiffany, help us deliver a Democratic legislature, and get the changes, the transformational changes that all of us need and deserve. Now, I want to ask for your votes. Every single one of you, I'd like to earn your vote on August 11th and again on November 3rd. I am the candidate that has the most experience in and around state government. I'm the one that's been able to get things done in state government again and again. I've also earned the most endorsements in the race from elected leaders and former elected leaders in every part of the state, including Milwaukee County. I'm also the candidate that can help bridge the gap and build the broadest possible coalition, including engaging former Trump voters who are disaffected, rightfully so, and the young people who are disaffected with the status quo, rightfully so. Together, we can build the Wisconsin we deserve. Thank you so much.
Well, the thing that inspires me the most is the level of activism, the amount of people who didn't just cower in fear because Donald Trump got back in office. And also the people who stood firm, even when we had a different governor in the state, some people who were in this room or a room like this back then and are still in a room like this today until we finally get the job done. That's what gives me inspiration. And it's the amount of young people who show up all across Wisconsin, the young people who pop up at candidate forums that you never expect a young person to show up to. What are you doing? Here's a weekend. But they show up because they're concerned about their future. They're frightened about the prospects that lie ahead of them. Whether you're coming out of high school, whether you're coming out of college, you're worried about artificial intelligence, taking what prospective job you may have, or the impact of data centers on your community. But again, people are not cowering in fear. People are showing up, they are fighting, and they are demanding better. My last campaign, we had the highest youth voter turnout in the entire country. That energy was there then, that energy is multiplied now. As I look around and as I travel the state, you get to meet so many unique people with unique perspectives. And we've built broad coalitions in the past, and I look forward to building even broader coalitions in the future, where we dispel this myth of an urban-rural divide, where we make sure that the conversations that may pit cities against rural communities is ended right then and there. And we talk about the things that we have in common, because opportunity has been taken away from all of us. People in a good school to send their children to, people in a good job that puts food on the table, people want to be able to go to a doctor and not worry about a surprise bill. And that reality has been denied to far too many people. And all the issues that we've talked about today, we don't see any of it happen unless we protect our democracy. And that means eschewing anti-democratic moves that would determine outcomes of elections, because voters should decide. These decisions shouldn't happen in smoke-filled rooms by party bosses and special interests. And I'm looking forward to earning everybody's support in this room. Everybody, not just some of you, I want everybody's support in this room as we move forward to save this state from the worst and usher in a new era of opportunity that leaves nobody behind.
Thank you to every one of our candidates for being here and for taking these questions seriously. Wisconsin's families are listening. And I would also like to thank our audience, those that are here and those that are online, and to the organizations that made today possible. The Wisconsin Early Childhood Association, the Wisconsin Childcare Administrators Association, the Wisconsin Family Child Care Association, and the Wisconsin Head Start Association. And please
help me to thank Heather Murray for being an incredible advocate and doing the heavy lifting involved in making this first forum on childcare a reality.